Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in a series of what I'm calling In Defense of, where I take an album that I really love that a lot of other people don't like, and I come to its defense. So the album that I picked for today is from 2008, Judas Priest's Nostradamus. Now, this is an album, when it came out, a lot of people were disappointed. Let me get one thing straight from the beginning here. Do I think that Nostradamus is better than British Steel or Stained Class, Defenders of the Faith, or Painkiller? No. But I think this album gets a lot of unwarranted hate. Some of it I can understand. Part of the problem, I think, is this album was the second album after Rob Halford had came back to the band. When Rob came back, they released Angel of Retribution, which was a fantastic record that in a lot of ways harked back to their earlier periods. There's references to some of their earlier songs and some of the lyrics and stuff. It's sort of a nod to their past. So when the time came for them to release their next record, they were talking about this big concept album that they were going to do. And I think everybody got excited. I got excited. And in my mind, I was expecting a Angel of Retribution Part 2, just in a concept form maybe. Well, when the album came out, I know my first initial reaction was, what is this? It sounded way different than I expected it to sound. And I think a lot of people had that same reaction. Part of it is there are a lot of keyboards on this record. There's a lot of synthesizer, keyboard, a lot of string sounds done with a synthesizer. In fact, I would say that the strings and the keyboard sounds are mixed as loudly on the same level as the guitars. Now, if you're used to classic Judas Priest, like the album Screaming for Vengeance, where the guitars are just screaming out of the speakers at you, this is going to throw you off because the guitars are pulled back a little and put kind of on the same level as the keyboards and the strings. So there's a lot of that on this record, and I think that was a little off-putting to some people. The other thing is, it's a very long record. It's 3 vinyl albums. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. It's 2 CDs. Could they have trimmed it down? Yeah, probably. It's a concept album about the life of Nostradamus. For me, it works, but for a lot of people, I think that it's just too much music. The other problem is the way the album is structured. There's all these interludes and preludes. So you have an interlude, and then you have a main song, a long song, and then you have a short little thing, and then another main song. And that's kind of the flow of the record. And these interludes and preludes, they tend to be the things that have all the keyboards in them, that are melodramatic, the synthesizer strings. So I think if you were to take out all those little short pieces and you just had the longer numbers on here and just put that all on one disc, I think it would have made for a better disc for a lot of people, because there's some real heavy and burning songs on here. Like the first song, the first proper song on the album, Prophecy, is kind of like a chugger. I am Nostradamus. And the title track, Nostradamus, is a straight up fast burner that sounds like it could have been off of Painkiller. So there is a lot of heavy, fast, kind of typical Judas Priest stuff on here. I think it's just the keyboards and these interludes that is maybe hard for people to get past those. And don't get me wrong, there are some songs on here that are maybe a little too much. One song, I think it's Lost Love. Nostradamus singing to his wife, his girlfriend, his lover, whatever. And maybe that's a bridge too far for some people. It's kind of a very keyboard heavy ballad. There's some songs on here, like that particular song. There's one on here called Alone that is just real heavy on the keyboards. I mean, there's barely any guitars in them. So that may be a bit much for some of the typical Priest fans. But, you know, once I got past the initial shock of, whoa, this isn't Angel of Retribution, or this doesn't sound like anything really the Priest has done before this, I was able to sit back, kind of clear my mind, and just take the album for what it is. And once I did that, I sat down with the booklet, followed along with the lyrics. I was able to really immerse myself in the story, and I think that the album has a really nice flow, and these interludes and preludes actually, in my opinion, work really well. You know, they add to the overall flow of the whole record. And Judas Priest was a band that was known for taking some left turns here and there. You know, they weren't afraid to try different things. I think back to Point of Entry. They had released British Steel, hugely successful album, their breakout album, if you want. And Point of Entry veered them off into more of a melodic pop direction. And a lot of people didn't like that. Personally, I like that record. It's not one of my favorites, but they sort of did the same thing with Turbo, where they got into the guitar synthesizers, and then they returned to their classic sound with Painkiller. And so for me, this is just Judas Priest spreading their wings a little bit, trying something different. I mean, it's certainly not some sort of sellout record. If the easy thing for them to do would have been to just release a typical Priest sounding album. Instead, they go out and they release a double CD concept record, trying all these different things. I mean, to me, they challenged themselves and they tried to do something different. Unfortunately, it was met with a lot of criticism, and a lot of people really didn't like it. And, you know, again, I do sort of understand that. And then when they went out on tour for this record, they really only played one or two songs from it. And that was it. They never played anything from this after that tour. And I know I've read some interviews with KK Downing where he said that they wanted to take this out and go to certain big cities and play the whole album with an orchestra and a big theatrical production. And I would have loved that. I would have loved to have seen that. I would love to have something like that on DVD. And maybe that would have presented this album in a little bit of a different light. Because also the mix on it, it's with all the synthesized strings, the string sounds on here, even for 2008, are a little bit dated. So, you know, maybe if they had presented it live, it would have come across differently. To some people, I don't know. But I think that there's a lot of great stuff on here. The song Death is an awesome song. It's a big, long, epic song. It starts off with a bell and big, heavy riffs and all these changes and these guitar melodies. That's another thing. KK Downing and Glenn Tipton, especially Glenn Tipton, he has some really nice leads on here, and it's really cool to hear them playing acoustic guitar and doing some different things. I think Glenn Tipton is a really underrated guitar player. I think he gets overlooked because he's part of a guitar duo. The same thing happens with Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. You know, you kind of lump them together, and maybe they don't get the individual attention that they deserve. But I think Glenn Tipton really shines on this. So, okay, that's the reasons why I like this this record. Maybe if you haven't heard this in a while, give it another listen. Approach it maybe with a different mindset instead of going in expecting classic British steel style Judas Priest. Go into it with, hey, this is different, with an open mind. If you've never heard it before, be forewarned, it's not your typical Priest record. I was pleasantly surprised. Before I did this video, I went on Amazon and I wanted to read some reviews to see what people were saying. And I was expecting it to have like, you know, 2.5 stars out of 5. And to my surprise, it had 4.5 stars out of 5. And there was a lot of favorable reviews and a lot of people saying like, it took me a little while to get into this, but once I got into it, I loved it. So I think there might be a fan base, people starting to come around to this record. And I hope as time passes that it does gain some more fans, because again, I don't think it's the best thing they've ever done, but I think it's an interesting album, and it's definitely worth a listen. So, all right, Judas Priest, Nostradamus. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you like it, what you like or dislike about it, and make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until we see you again, remember to stay heavy, stay metal.